Hey guys, this is Plini. In this lesson we're going to talk about how you can take a lullaby and turn it into a prog metal song. And so the way that I like to do this, when I write music, I like to operate in the most simple way possible. I think a lot of the time when we're focused on writing progressive music or complicated music, you can become scared that the finished product of all the bands that you like or the artists you listen to has so many layers and ideas going on. How could you ever do it, and where would you start? So with this, I'd like to strip it back to a melody that basically could be a lullaby that's that simple, and then we can work out how to develop it into the section of a song of mine called Electric Sunrise. So while this might sound like it's a whole bunch of complicated chords, to me I think of it as just a simple melody over a pedal tone, which then gets harmonized a couple of times to become layered into the final product. So the melody at its simplest form is just which sounds almost exactly like something you could use to put your child to sleep. Which is definitely not something you want to put on your prog metal album. But then once we start to layer it, it starts to develop away from being something for a 0 to 4-year-old and more to maybe a 0 to 100-year-old, at least hopefully. And because as a player I don't consider myself to be exceptionally technical, I like things that are comfortable and simple under the hands. And one of the great things about the guitar being tuned to fourths is you can use one finger to play that whole relationship. And so to me that's immediately an attractive thing, and that becomes part of the foundation of this chord progression or melody. So using a combination of this stacked fourth and a sixth, we just run that down underneath that top melody note, and that becomes so by layering with fourths and then the next voice is another fourth or a second, these are quite sort of dissonant choices, which is part of the reason this pulls it away from that sort of lullaby feel and back into the realm of metal, and you can sort of wear a black t-shirt and not smile while still listening to it. So the next voice that's layered is and it's here at the turning point that we introduce a different tone, which is this. Even though the melody resolves with, the way we layer the notes underneath that final note creates a much darker tone with this minor major 7. Which is almost a little bit nightmarish. So that's again pulling away from that idea of fucking up a lullaby. And so if we're, after treating this in a sort of isolated way where we just take notes and stack them, that would leave you with something that sounds like this. So now it's a lot more interesting, but it still isn't quite there, and that's because we haven't paid attention to the rhythm yet. So almost the strongest part of what makes modern progressive music interesting to me is what happens rhythmically. So if we phrase each of these sort of little melody chords only on the 1 of each bar, or on the 1 and 3, it's still not going to come across, it's still going to come across a little bit too much like a lullaby because it's too simple. So by incorporating a lot more syncopation and anticipated accents, you're left with a melody that's more rounded in terms of how interest has been put into the note choice and the rhythm choice. And then that, if you're taking this into a songwriting approach, that gives you a lot more room to do fun things with the drums, with the bass, maybe with the vocals. So the final incarnation would be this. And if this is still sounding too much like a lullaby to you, there's this great thing that we guitarists love called distortion. And one thing about these sort of chords is they have these built-in dissonances like that, which sounds kind of disgusting in the best way possible. So you can take a lullaby-like melody and stack this harmony into it, and then apply gain to turn into a much more aggressive riff that has almost nothing to do with where the original idea came from, even though that idea was super simple and accessible. And that would sound something like...